greetings to all of you, my dear sisters and brothers, and my dear friends, and all of you, wherever you come from, around the globe. Welcome to my new broadcasting. Be committed, a Ruth and Esther study, doing God's will, whatever the cost. This is our part 2 and the end of the book of Ruth. And tomorrow we're going to study the book of Esther. Today it's the bride and the baby. And this is your pastor, Yeti. So we are now in the last chapter of the book of Ruth. And that chapter says, let me read it for you. It is Ruth, chapter 4, verse 11 to 12, that I'm going to read to you. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." It's a wonderful thing when the covenant community sincerely rejoices with the bride and groom, because what they are doing is in the will of God. The people prayed that Ruth would be fruitful in bearing children, for in Israel children were considered a blessing and not a burden. Alas, that's not the attitude in society today. It was important that the Jewish wives bear children, not only to perpetuate the nation, but also because it would be through Israel that God would send the Messiah to earth. The Jews abhorred abortion and the exposing of children to die, practices that were common in other nations. Jacob's 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, bore them 8 sons who built the nation by founding the leading tribes of Israel. The use of the word Ephrathah in Ruth 4 verse 11 is significant, for the Hebrew word means fruitful. The people wanted Ruth to be fruitful and famous and bring honor to their little town. It was the place where Rachel was buried. But more importantly, it would be known as the place where Jesus Christ was born. The neighbors also wanted the house of Boaz to be like that of Perez. The family of Perez had settled in Bethlehem, and Boaz was a descendant of Perez. Tamar, the mother of Perez, was not a godly woman, but her name is found in our Lord's genealogy. You can read that in Matthew 1 verse 3. What wonderful changes came in Ruth's life because she trusted Boaz and let him work on her behalf. She went from loneliness to love, from toil to rest, from poverty to wealth, from worry to assurance, and from despair to hope. She was no longer Ruth the Moabitess, for the past was gone and she was making a new beginning. She was now Ruth, the wife of Boaz, a name she was proud to bear. One of the many images of the churches in the Bible is the bride of Christ. In Ephesians 5, the verses 22 and 233, the emphasis is on Christ's love for the church as seen in his ministries. He died for the church. He cleanses and nourishes the church through the word, the present. And he will one day present the church in glory is the future. So we have the past, the present, and the future. Christ has prepared a beautiful home for his bride, and one day will celebrate his wedding. Now we are here that Ruth will have a baby. And we can read that in also the chapter 4, verse 13 to 22. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and carried for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. The genealogy of David. Then this is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nachson, and Nachson the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. God had been gracious to Ruth back in Moab by giving her the faith to trust him and be saved. His grace continued when she moved to Bethlehem, for he guided her to the field of Boaz, where Boaz fell in love with her. God's grace continued at the town gate, where the nearer kinsmen rejected Ruth and Boaz purchased her. After the marriage, God poured out his grace on Ruth and Boaz by giving her conception, and then by giving her the safe delivery of a son, whom they named Obed, and that means servant. God would use his baby to be a source of blessing to many. Obed was a blessing to Boaz and Ruth. This was no ordinary baby, for it was God's special gift to Boaz and Ruth. And what a blessing little Obed was to their home. But every baby is a special gift from God and should be treated that way. Every baby deserves a loving home and caring parents who want to raise the child in the training and admonition of the Lord. What a great privilege it is to bring new life into the world and then to guide that life so it matures to become all that God has planned. Obed was also a blessing to Naomi. His grandmother informally adopted him as her own son and became his foster mother. The women of Bethlehem shared Naomi's joy when they said, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer." The references is to Obed, not Boaz. Obed was a restorer of life to Naomi. Every grandparent can bear witness that grandchildren are better than the fountain of youth, for we get young again when the grandchildren come to visit. Isn't that true? I say yes, though not all grandparents agree with it. They all know They all know the saying, they're called grandchildren because they're grand when they come and grand when they leave. There's no better way to get a new lease on life than to start investing yourself in the younger generation. Every baby who is born into this world is a vote for the future. And grandparents need to focus on the future and not on the past. When you're holding a baby, you're holding the future in your arms. Obed would be a blessing to Naomi in another way. He would one day care for the family that brought him into the world, including his grandmother Naomi. Boaz had redeemed the family inheritance. Now Obed would continue the family line, protected the inheritance, and use it to sustain Naomi. He would live up to his name and be a servant to Naomi, his foster mother. The guarantee for this ministry would not be the law of the land, but the love of Ruth for the mother-in-law. Obed would learn early to love Naomi, even as Ruth loved her. Obed was an only son, but his affection for his mother and grandmother would be equal to that of 7 sons. Obed would bring blessing to Bethlehem. The child would bring fame to both the family name and the name of his native town. Elimelech's name almost disappeared from Israel, but Obed would make that name famous and bring glory to Bethlehem. This happened, of course, through the life and ministry of King David and of David's greater son, Jesus Christ. Naomi would have the comfort of knowing that the family name would not perish, but increase in fame. Obed would bring blessing to Israel. Obed was the grandfather of King David, one of Israel's greatest rulers. When the name of David is mentioned, we usually think of either Goliath or Bathsheba. David did committed a great sin, but he was also a great man of faith whom God used to build the kingdom of Israel. He led the people in overcoming their enemies, expanding their inheritances, and most of all, worshiping their God. He wrote worship songs for the Levites to sing and devised musical instruments for them to play. He spent a lifetime gathering wealth for the building of the temple, and God gave him the plans for the temple so Solomon could do the job. Whether he had in his hands a sling or sword, a harp or hymnal, David was a great servant of God who brought in untold blessings to Israel. Obed would bring blessings to the whole world. The greatest thing God did for David was not to give him victory over his enemies or wealth for the building of the temple. The greatest privilege God gave him was that of being the ancestor of the Messiah. David wanted to build a house for God, but God told him he would build a house, a family for David. David knew that the Messiah would come from the kingly tribe of Judah. But nobody knew which family in Judah would be chosen. God chose David's family, and Redeemer would be known as the Son of David. Little did those Bethlehemites know what God had great plans for that little boy. Obed would have a son named Jesse, and Jesse would have 8 sons, the youngest of which would be David, the king. Remember that the next time you behold a baby or a child, that little one might be one for whom God has planned a great future. The Moabites were not to enter the congregations of the Lord even to the 10th generation. But the little book of Ruth closes with a 10-generation genealogy that climaxes with the name of David. Never underestimate the power of the grace of God. My beautiful people, this is the end of the book of Ruth. So I'm going to give you a little reflection on Ruth. The main purpose of the book of Ruth is historical. It explains the ancestry of David and builds a bridge between the time of the judge and the period when God gave Israel a king. But the Bible is more than an historical book, a history book. There are many practical lessons to be learned from these events, lessons that can encourage us in our spiritual walk. The book of Ruth is no exception. This little book certainly reveals the providence of God in the way He guided Ruth and Naomi. It encouraged me to know that God still cares for us, even when we're bitter toward Him, as Naomi was. God directed Ruth, a new believer, and used her faith and obedience to transform defeat into glory, in victory. God is concerned about the details of our life, and this fact should give us courage and joy as we seek to live each day to please Him. The book of Ruth beautifully illustrates God's work of salvation. The story opens with Ruth as an outsider, a stranger, but it ends with Ruth as a member of the covenant community because she has married Boaz, her kinsman redeemer. He paid the price for her to be redeemed. But the book also illustrates the believer's deepening relationship with the Lord. In chapter 1, Ruth doesn't even know that Boaz exists. In chapter 2, Ruth is a poor laborer, groaning in the field of Boaz and receiving his gifts, giving his gifts to her. And Boaz is only a mighty man of wealth who shows kindness to her. The turning point is in chapter 3, where Ruth yields herself at the feet of Boaz and believes his promises. The result is recorded in chapter 4. Ruth is no longer a poor gleaner, for now she has Boaz. No, she has Boaz, and everything he owns belongs to her. Too many of God's people are content to live in chapter 2, picking up the leftovers and doing the best they can in their difficult situation. They want God's gift, but they don't want a deeper communion with God. What a difference it would make if they would only surrender themselves to the Lord and focus on the giver instead of the gifts. The book of Ruth reminds us that God is at work in our world, seeking a bride and reaping a harvest, and we must find our place in His program of winning the lost. The events in the book of Ruth occurred during the period of the Judges, a time not much different from our own days. If you focus on only the evils of our day, you will become pessimistic and cynical. But if you ask God what fields He wants you to work in and faithfully serve Him, you'll experience His grace, love, and joy. Judge is the book of no king. 1 Samuel is the book of man's king. When God gives Saul to Israel because they ask for him, things will get so bad in our world that the nations will one day cry out for a king to feed them and protect them. That king will appear, and we call him the Antichrist. But 1 Samuel isn't the end of the story. For 2 Samuel is the book of God's king. David did appear on the scene, and he did establish a kingdom in the name of the Lord. God's king will appear, judge this evil world, put away ungodliness, and then establish His glorious kingdom. It was Ruth's commitment that made the difference in her life and in the lives of the people she loved. Have you put yourself at the feet of the Lord of the harvest? Until you do, God can never be to you all that He wants to be. I beautiful people. Open your heart for Christ. There is always love. There is always room. There is never rejection. Blessings to all of you, my dear ones. This is your Pastor Yeti. So tomorrow we start in the book of Esther. I love you guys. Bye. Bye.